Commander Raven Thorn stood at the observation deck of the Night Weaver, watching distant stars blur past in streams of light. Her reflection in the reinforced glass showed a woman hardened by years of military service, sharp features, calculating gray eyes, and a prominent scar running along her jaw. The research vessel's sterile corridors felt more like a prison than the sanctuary she'd hoped for after leaving active combat. "Commander, your presence is requested in Laboratory 7, the ship's AI announced, its voice eerily smooth. "Admiral Perseus has sent a special delivery." Raven's jaw tightened. The Admiral's gifts were rarely anything to celebrate. She made her way through the winding corridors, boots clicking against metal floors. The laboratory wing always unsettled her, too many secrets behind those sealed doors, too many whispers of experiments that shouldn't exist. Dr. Lyra Voss waited outside Lab 7, her white coat immaculate as always. "Commander, how kind of you to join us." Her smile never reached her eyes. "The Admiral believes you'll find this specimen particularly interesting." "I don't need more interesting things in my life, Doctor," Raven replied, but followed her inside anyway. The laboratory's harsh lights illuminated a scene that made her blood run cold. In the center of the room, surrounded by monitoring equipment and armed guards, knelt a being unlike anything Raven had ever encountered. Female in form, but clearly not human, her skin had an opalescent quality, marked with intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with inner light. A heavy collar encircled her throat, connected to chains that bound her wrists and ankles. But it was her eyes that caught Raven's attention, deep violet, filled with both defiance and profound sorrow. "We're calling her Specimen S7, though she refers to herself as Senna," Dr. Voss explained, checking something on her datapad. "Found in the outer rim during a classified operation. Remarkable psychic abilities, though currently suppressed by the containment collar. The Admiral thought you might appreciate having your own research subject." Raven fought to keep her expression neutral, even as disgust churned in her stomach. "And what exactly am I supposed to do with her?" "Study her. Train her. The collar's controls are keyed to your biometrics now." Dr. Voss handed her a small device. "She's quite intelligent, despite her current state. The Admiral believes your experience with hostile species makes you uniquely qualified to handle her." The being, Senna, lifted her head slightly, those violet eyes meeting Raven's. There was something in that gaze that struck deeper than any weapon Raven had ever faced. Not hatred or fear, but understanding. As if Senna could see past her commander's uniform to the wounds she carried beneath. "I'll need full access to her files," Raven said, her tone carefully professional. "And private quarters arranged for the specimen. I prefer to conduct my research without an audience." Dr. Voss's smile tightened. "Of course, Commander. Though I should warn you, she's proven difficult with previous handlers. The collar's shock function has been quite necessary." Raven's hand closed around the control device, her knuckles white. "I'm sure we'll manage." "You're dismissed, Doctor." Once they were alone, save for the ever-present security cameras, Raven approached Senna slowly. The being remained perfectly still, but Raven sensed she was being evaluated just as carefully as she was observing her new charge. "Can you understand me?" Raven asked quietly. Senna nodded once, the movement causing her chains to rattle softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." Raven crouched down to eye level, keeping her movements deliberate and non-threatening. "But I need you to work with me, at least for now. Can you do that?" Another nod, and something else, a fleeting sensation of warmth and cautious hope that seemed to brush against Raven's consciousness despite the collar's dampening effect. "Good. Let's get you somewhere more comfortable than this laboratory." Raven stood, keying in the command to release the floor anchors on Senna's chains. "We'll figure the rest out later." As she led her new charge through the ship's corridors, Raven felt the weight of eyes following them, crew members pretending not to stare, security cameras tracking their movement. She'd been given a gift she never wanted, a responsibility she never asked for. But looking at Senna's quiet dignity despite her chains, Raven knew she couldn't simply play along with whatever the Admiral had planned. She'd seen too much cruelty in her years of service, participated in too many actions that haunted her dreams. Perhaps this was a chance to finally do something right, even if it meant risking everything she'd worked for. What she didn't know then was that this was only the beginning, the first step on a path that would change not only their lives but the fate of entire worlds hidden in the darkness between the stars. 2 weeks passed aboard the Nightweaver like a slow-moving dream. Raven had converted her private quarters into a shared space, setting up a separate sleeping area for Senna behind a privacy screen. The chains remained, they had to, for appearances, but Raven kept them loose enough to allow movement. Every night, she noticed how Senna would trace the patterns on her skin, their glow dimming and brightening like distant stars. "Your markings," Raven said one evening, keeping her voice low to avoid the room's surveillance. "They respond to your emotions, don't they?" Senna sat cross-legged on her bed, the chains pooled around her like liquid silver. She nodded, then hesitantly reached out her hand. Raven had learned this gesture. Senna's people communicated through touch, sharing thoughts and memories like wavelengths of light. Despite Dr. Voss's warnings about maintaining professional distance, Raven found herself moving closer. The moment their fingers met, warmth flooded her mind. Not words exactly, but images, a world of crystal spires and flowing water, beings like Senna dancing in formations as their markings created symphonies of light. The memory carried such profound longing that Raven's chest ached. "You're home," she whispered. Senna's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Their quiet routine was interrupted the next morning by Dr. Voss's unannounced visit. "Commander, the Admiral is requesting progress reports. Your subject has been here for 2 weeks, yet you've submitted minimal data." Raven stood protectively between the doctor and Senna. "My methods require building trust first. Rushing the process could compromise the results." "Trust?" Dr. Voss laughed softly. "It's a specimen, Commander. The Admiral didn't give you a pet, he gave you a weapon to develop. Perhaps you need a demonstration of proper handling techniques." Before Raven could react, Dr. Voss pulled out her override device. Senna's collar activated with a cruel hum, sending her to her knees. The markings on her skin flared brilliant red with pain. "Stop." Raven's command held all the authority of her military rank. "That's enough, Doctor. She's under my jurisdiction now." Dr. Voss lowered the device, her smile cold. "Just a reminder of what she is, Commander. The Admiral expects results within the week. Don't disappoint him." After the doctor left, Raven knelt beside Senna, who trembled from the collar's aftereffects. Without thinking, she gathered the alien woman into her arms. Senna's skin was cool to the touch, her markings now a deep blue of sorrow. "I'm sorry," Raven murmured. "I should have prevented that." Senna's hand found hers, and suddenly Raven's mind filled with images, security protocols, laboratory layouts, guard rotations. She pulled back, startled by the clarity of the information. "You've been mapping the ship," she realized. "Even with the collar dampening your abilities, you've been gathering intelligence." A slight smile curved Senna's lips, the first Raven had seen. Another touch, another flood of images, Dr. Voss in her private laboratory, conducting experiments on other beings with abilities similar to Senna's. None had survived the procedures. Raven's blood ran cold. "That's why the Admiral sent you to me. They're not developing weapons, they're trying to replicate your species' abilities. And Dr. Voss's failures mean she's running out of test subjects." Senna's grip tightened, sharing one final vision, a massive ship, hidden in the nebula the Nightweaver had passed last week. Others like her were imprisoned there, their lights growing dimmer by the day. "A prison transport," Raven breathed. "They're harvesting your people." The revelation settled over her like a shadow. Everything she'd fought for, every medal she'd earned, felt hollow in the face of this truth. But she couldn't simply free Senna, the collar's tracking system would alert security instantly. They needed a plan. That night, after ensuring the surveillance system showed them sleeping, Raven began making careful notes on her personal datapad. Guard schedules, maintenance cycles, blind spots in the security grid, anything that might help. Senna watched from her bed, her markings pulsing with a new pattern, hope mixed with determination. "We'll need help," Raven whispered. "Someone in engineering who can disable the collar without triggering alarms. And we'll have to move fast, before Dr. Voss decides to take matters into her own hands." Senna's response came as a gentle wave of warmth, carrying images of other crew members who'd shown her kindness. One face stood out, Lieutenant Reed from engineering, who always averted his eyes when passing them in the corridors, as if ashamed of what he witnessed. "Reed," Raven nodded. "Yes, he might help us. But we'll only get one chance at this. If we fail." She didn't need to finish the thought. They both knew the price of failure. But looking at Senna, seeing the quiet strength behind her otherworldly beauty, Raven knew she would risk everything to break these chains. The lights dimmed for ship's night, leaving only the soft glow of Senna's markings illuminating their shared space. Tomorrow, they would begin planning in earnest. Tomorrow, they would start their dangerous game of deception and hope. But tonight, in the whispers of darkness, two beings from different worlds shared the same dream of freedom. Lieutenant Reed's hands trembled as he examined the collar's circuitry through a microscanner. "Commander, this isn't just a restraint device. The neural interfaces are far more complex than anything I've seen before." They had cornered him during his night shift in the auxiliary engineering bay, away from prying eyes. Raven kept watch while Senna sat perfectly still, allowing Reed to study the technology that bound her. "Can you disable it?" Raven asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Reed swallowed hard. "Yes, but... Commander, if we're caught..." "We're already caught, Lieutenant. The only question is whether we'll do something about it." She showed him the data they'd gathered about Dr. Voss's experiments. "This isn't just about Senna anymore. There's an entire prison transport out there." A soft chime from the computer terminal interrupted them, the midnight shift change. Reed quickly powered down his scanner as footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. "Tomorrow," he whispered. "During the reactor maintenance cycle. The power fluctuations will mask any anomalies from the collar's deactivation." But tomorrow proved too late. The morning shift had barely begun when Dr. Voss's voice came through the ship-wide comm, "Commander Thorne, bring specimen S7 to Laboratory 3 immediately." "Admiral's orders." Raven felt her heart race as she looked at Senna, whose markings had shifted to a pale, fearful white. They both knew what awaited in Laboratory 3, they'd seen the records of previous examinations. "We move now," Raven decided, retrieving a hidden pulse pistol from beneath her mattress. "Reed, get to engineering. When I signal, cut power to Deck C, all of it. That'll trigger emergency protocols." "Exactly. Maximum chaos." She turned to Senna, wishing they had more time. "Are you ready?" Senna's response came not in images this time, but in a wave of pure determination that made the air itself seem to vibrate. Her markings blazed with newfound strength. They made their way through the corridors, maintaining the appearance of prisoner and guard one last time. Dr. Voss waited in Laboratory 3, surrounded by her team of researchers and medical equipment that looked more like instruments of torture. "Ah, Commander." Prompt as always. The doctor's smile remained pleasant, but her eyes were sharp with anticipation. "Secure the specimen to the examination table, please." Raven moved slowly, deliberately. "Doctor, I need to register a formal protest. These procedures haven't been properly authorized." "Your protest is noted and dismissed," Dr. Voss cut her off. "The Admiral has given me full authority. Now, secure the specimen or I'll have security do it for you." Raven's hand brushed against Senna's arm, a silent signal. In that brief touch, they shared everything words couldn't express: fear, trust, and a desperate hope. "Now, Commander." Raven drew her pulse pistol in one fluid motion, years of combat training taking over. "Read, now." The lights went out, plunging the laboratory into darkness. Emergency backups kicked in seconds later, bathing everything in red light. But in that moment of chaos, Raven had already disabled 2 guards and placed herself between Senna and the research team. What happened next defied explanation. Despite the collar, despite the dampening technology, Senna's markings erupted with brilliant light. The patterns across her skin shifted and swirled like liquid starfire, and every piece of electronic equipment in the room began to short-circuit in cascading waves of sparks. Dr. Voss screamed orders as her carefully controlled experiment spiraled into chaos. "Security to Laboratory 3. The specimen is loose." But Raven had planned for this. The emergency protocols had sealed off Deck C, trapping security on the other side of pressure doors. It wouldn't hold them for long, but it didn't need to. "Run," she shouted, firing her pistol at the laboratory's main console. The explosion sent researchers diving for cover. They raced through red-lit corridors, alarms blaring around them. Senna's light illuminated their path, growing stronger with each step. Whatever connection she had to the ship's systems was growing, the collar's restraints failing against her true power. They were almost to the emergency shuttle bay when Dr. Voss's voice echoed through the ship, "Commander Thorne, you're throwing away your career, your life, for what? An alien weapon?" Raven helped Senna through a maintenance hatch, her reply lost in the sound of distant explosions as systems throughout the ship continued to overload. They emerged in the shuttle bay just as Reed arrived from another access tunnel. "The collar," Raven gasped. "Get it off her. Now." Reed worked frantically while Raven covered the entrance. The sound of cutting torches on the sealed doors told them security was almost through. Almost, there. Reed's tools sparked against the collar's surface. Just one more. The collar fell away with a final crack of electricity. Senna stood slowly, her entire body now radiating light that made the emergency signal seem dim in comparison. When she opened her eyes, they shone with the same brilliant energy. A voice that wasn't quite sound filled their minds, "Thank you." The sealed doors burst open. Security forces poured in, weapons raised. Dr. Voss stood behind them, triumph written across her face. "Enough of this foolishness," the doctor announced. "Commander Thorne, Lieutenant Reed, you're under arrest for treason. And as for our specimen." She raised a handheld device. "The collar may be gone, but the neural implants remain. One push of this button will." The device crumbled to dust in her hand. Every weapon trained on them did the same, dissolving into metallic powder that drifted to the floor like glittering snow. Senna stepped forward, her bare feet leaving trails of light on the deck plating. When she spoke again in their minds, her voice carried both warmth and warning, "We're leaving now. Please don't try to stop us." The security team backed away, their training useless against something they couldn't fight. Dr. Voss's face contorted with rage and fear as she watched her perfect specimen, her career-making discovery, slip through her fingers. "The shuttle's prepped," Reed announced from the control panel. "But they'll lock down the launch bay the moment we—" Senna raised her hands, and reality itself seemed to bend. The launch bay doors opened without a single command being entered, the force field protecting them from space remaining intact despite protocols that should have prevented exactly this. As they rushed toward the waiting shuttle, Raven realized their escape was only the beginning. Somewhere out there, a prison transport full of Senna's people waited to be freed. And after that, they would find her home, no matter how far they had to search. The stars were waiting. The abandoned space station horizon's edge drifted in the shadow of a gas giant, its skeletal frame barely visible against the planet's swirling storms. After 3 days of running, disabling tracking devices, and navigating through asteroid fields, they'd finally found temporary sanctuary in this forgotten corner of space. Reed worked on restoring power to the station's life support systems while Raven treated the wounds they'd acquired during their escape. Senna moved through the station's empty corridors like a ghost made of light, her markings pulsing with increasing strength as her powers continued to return. The neural implants, Reed called from a makeshift workshop he'd established. They're not just transmitters. They're storage devices. Whatever they did to you, Senna, they were collecting data. Senna drifted closer, her presence filling the room with gentle warmth. Since removing the collar, she'd begun communicating in more complex ways, not just images now, but emotions and memories that felt as real as their own. There were others, her thoughts whispered in their minds. Before me. They took our memories, studied how we connect to the energy that flows between stars. The prison transport, Raven remembered. We need to find it before they realize what we've discovered. Senna touched the station's central console, and suddenly the dead screens flickered to life. Star charts and shipping manifests appeared faster than human eyes could track. Her connection to technology had grown exponentially since her liberation, as if she were making up for lost time. Here, she projected, highlighting a distant sector. They hide in the nebula's storms. But we cannot free them alone. We won't have to, Reed said, pulling up his own data stream. Look at this, underground resistance channels, encrypted transmissions. There are others fighting back against these experiments. We just need to contact. The station's proximity alerts screamed to life. A massive ship had just dropped out of hyperspace nearby, a Nightweaver pursuit vessel. How did they find us so quickly? Raven demanded, rushing to the weapons console. Senna's light dimmed momentarily. The implants. Even decoded, they leave traces. Can you mask the signal? No. But I can use it. Before they could stop her, Senna pressed her hands against the station's main interface. Her markings blazed so bright they had to shield their eyes. Through their growing psychic connection, they felt her consciousness expand outward, reaching through space toward the pursuit vessel. On the ship's bridge, every screen and system suddenly displayed the same message in flowing, light script: we are not your weapons. The pursuing vessel's engines cut out, leaving it drifting. Then its lights began to flicker and die, system by system, as Senna turned their own technology against them. We must go, she urged. Now. While they're blind. They rushed to their shuttle, but Raven noticed Senna stumbling. The effort had weakened her significantly. Without thinking, she caught the alien woman in her arms. The moment they touched, Raven's mind filled with a cascade of returning memories, not Senna's this time, but older ones. Ancient ones. She saw a civilization that had seeded the stars with life, beings of pure energy and thought who had given birth to Senna's species before vanishing into legend. The luminous, Raven whispered. Your ancestors, they weren't weapons at all. They were creators. Senna's eyes met hers, filled with starlight and something deeper. Yes. And somewhere, their last gift to us remains hidden. A place of healing and remembrance. Then that's where we'll go, Reed announced from the shuttle's pilot seat. After we free your people. As they fled through the gas giant storms, leaving the disabled pursuit vessel behind, Raven held Senna close. The alien woman's markings had shifted to a new pattern, one that spoke of hope, determination, and something else. Something that made Raven's heart race whenever their eyes met. They were fugitives now, hunted by the very forces they'd once served. But looking at Senna's quiet smile, feeling the trust and affection that flowed between them, Raven knew she'd never been more certain of her path. The station vanished behind them as they plotted a course for the nebula. Somewhere in that cosmic storm, prisoners waited to be freed. And beyond that, ancient secrets lay dormant, waiting to be rediscovered by those worthy of their power. Senna's light filled the shuttle's cabin like dawn breaking over an alien world. Whatever came next, they would face it together, not as weapon and handler, but as equals joined by choice and trust in the first delicate blooms of love. The nebula's heart pulsed with sheets of cosmic fire, streamers of plasma dancing between ancient stellar remnants. Their small shuttle navigated the chaos guided by Senna's connection to the currents of energy that flowed through space itself. They weren't alone. The resistance contacts Reed had discovered brought reinforcements, a ragtag fleet of modified merchant vessels and retired military ships, crewed by those who'd witnessed similar atrocities and chosen to fight back. There, Senna directed, her light illuminating the shuttle's cockpit. Behind the seventh storm wall, the prison transport emerged from the nebulous clouds like a nightmare-given form, a massive black vessel bristling with weapons and containment cells. But it wasn't the only ship waiting for them. Multiple contacts, Reed announced grimly. Military escorts. They knew we were coming. Raven moved to the weapons station, her expression hard. Of course they did. But they don't know what we've become. Senna stood between them, her markings now spiral galaxies of light. When she spoke in their minds, her voice carried the weight of centuries. My people were never meant for war. We were born to create, to nurture, to connect. But sometimes creation requires destruction first. The battle erupted like a new star being born. The resistance fleet engaged the military escorts while their shuttle slipped through the chaos, protected by Senna's ability to bend energy and probability around them. They docked with the prison transport amid a storm of weapons fire. Security teams rushed to intercept them, but they never reached their targets. Senna's power had grown beyond anything her captors had imagined. Weapons dissolved. Doors opened. Barriers meant to contain her kind proved as substantial as shadows. In the ship's holding cells, they found them, dozens of beings like Senna, their lights dimmed but not extinguished. As each prisoner was freed, their combined radiance grew, turning the prison transport's corridors into rivers of living light. But it was in the ship's central laboratory that they discovered the true horror, and hope, of their mission. Ancient artifacts lined the walls, stolen from ruins that predated human civilization. The Luminous had left more than legends behind. They'd left tools, knowledge, and keys to powers that could reshape reality itself. Dr. Voss stood among her twisted collection, Admiral Perseus himself at her side. Both held weapons pointed at the intruders. You don't understand what you're interrupting, Voss snarled. The power to transcend mortality itself. We understand perfectly, Raven cut her off. You wanted weapons. You wanted tools. But you forgot to ask what they wanted. The freed prisoners gathered behind them, their lights merging into a symphony of color and power. Senna stepped forward, no longer the broken creature they'd chained. She was radiant, terrible, and beautiful, a glimpse of what humanity might one day become, if they chose wisdom over power. We offer you a choice, her thoughts echoed through every mind on the ship. End this. Return what was stolen. Help us rebuild what was broken. The Admiral raised his weapon. You are property. He never finished the sentence. Reality rippled around them as Senna and her people joined their power together. Time seemed to stop, then stretch, then transform. In that eternal moment, Raven felt Senna's consciousness brush against hers one final time, not with words or images, but with pure truth. They weren't fighting to destroy or escape. They were fighting to create something new. Something better. When time resumed its normal flow, the laboratory had changed. The stolen artifacts hummed with renewed purpose, their ancient energy responding to their rightful inheritors. Dr. Voss and the Admiral found themselves disarmed, their weapons transformed into delicate crystalline sculptures. The age of cages is over, Raven announced to the stunned military personnel. You can help us build what comes next, or you can get out of the way. Choose quickly. The liberation took hours. The healing would take years. But as prisoners were freed and resistance ships docked to provide aid, Raven watched Senna among her people, teaching, healing, rebuilding bonds that had been severed by fear and greed. Later, in a quiet moment aboard their shuttle, Senna shared one final vision, a distant world, hidden behind veils of light and time, where the Luminous had left their greatest legacy. Not weapons or tools of power, but the seeds of new creation. Come with me?" she asked, her hand extended in invitation. Raven took it without hesitation, feeling Reed's quiet agreement behind them. They had all changed too much to go back to their old lives. And ahead of them stretched an adventure greater than any they could have imagined. Together, Raven promised as their small ship turned toward the galactic core. "Whatever we find out there, we'll face it together." Senna's markings shimmered with joy as she sealed that promise with a kiss that tasted of stardust and hope. Around them, the universe continued its eternal dance, full of horrors and wonders and infinite possibilities. They had chosen their path. Now it was time to see where it led. The end.